Pawel, thank you for making time to come and have a chat. It's good to see you again. I wanted to kick the interview off by asking you about something that we were chatting about last time, which was how your technology makes football clubs, we were talking about football clubs in particular, much more competitive, or at least a little bit more competitive. I mean, why do you say that? I mean, tell us about what your tech's doing and how does it help football clubs become more competitive?
Good to be here, Paul. Thank you for this question. The company that I am the CEO and the founder of Respo-Vision does optical player tracking. So it's essentially obtaining the bottom layer or the in-depth layer of sports data from sports games, from videos, visual input of sports games. We are particularly fluent in football, sometimes somewhere known as soccer, and basically we get positional data of players, ball, and referees. Imagine being able to understand where major actors were positioned 25 times per second, even in the 3D space if needed. So it's a very granular level of data. It's a very in-depth approach towards sports analytics because it allows a number of statistics to emerge. Statistics that are generally hard to be grasped by human eye, by human perception. So we now can start talking about the speeds of the ball, of the players, the distances between formations, and stuff, and lots of derivatives of these data points. Clubs are using it to gain advantage because at the end of the day, clubs, federations, national teams, the entities in sports, because at the end of the day, it's about winning. Yeah, that's the essence of sports. So I invite you and everyone to think about our company and essentially, broadly speaking, data in sports as just another tool in your
Yeah.
toolbox
Yeah.
to be
So let
competitive,
me,
to be
I mean,
better.
you've mentioned about how clubs, I mean, just give us a practical example of how would a club use some of your data? I mean, give us a practical example. If I was running a football club, just give me an example of how your data might help me, you know, work
Yeah.
with my team to increase their chances of winning.
Mhm. Yeah. So from the performance perspective, there are three major use cases, broadly speaking. So optimize your own performance, prepare towards your opponent, and scout, recruit players to your team. In
Right.
each of these use cases, the data can come in handy. The data can help you understand the situation better and make more informed decisions. In the first use case, assess your performance. You might have a look at whether your team has been fulfilling the tactical assumptions that the coach, that the manager told them to, whether the formations were in sync, whether the movement was as expected, or whether the physical effort was what was the players were tasked with. When it comes to the opponents, it's fairly similar, but it's focused on the patterns that you are expecting, analyzing patterns that you expect to see once you play a particular opponent, and then preparing your team to counter them. If you play a team that is good, it has a high stamina wide backs.
Mhm.
You need to have a high stamina wide players yourself in order to be able to to run around them. If the opposing team particular players deteriorate, their stats, their physical metrics deteriorate towards the end of the game, you might want to have a fresh player
Yeah,
subbed in
I
to
get it.
counter that or to use that. And finally, with recruitment, you have a certain philosophy of play, you have a certain requirements towards your players, and those can be, with regard to physical metrics or with regard to the tactical composition and a particular in-depth statistics that particular in-depth statistics will show. And you want to check these players whether they are capable of fulfilling of striving in your environment, and you can do that by applying the certain filters and certain perspectives to the games of their current team, and assessing whether they will fit in your team.
Yeah. And let me ask you, how much of an edge would it give your club? I mean, um, is it gonna turn you from a sort of a bottom of the league club to a club that can win everything? Is it gonna? I mean, how much of an advantage does this kind of technology accrue to people? I mean,
Yeah,
just a sense of the scale here.
yeah. This is a very good question, and my answer might be controversial, especially since I have a vested interest in in this number being high, but I would say 10 to 20%, and
Wow,
10 to
that's pretty
20%.
significant then.
Yeah, so it's significant, but it will not make a bottom dweller a mid-tier club. It will not make a mid-tier club immediately fight for the championship. It will make a huge difference if you are, if we look at the fight between the top dogs in the English Premier League, where one club ends up with 100 points and another with 99. That would make, that will be a make or break thing, winning versus not winning. But generally speaking, it's just a tool in the toolbox, a powerful tool, but a tool that one should not be, should not perceive as a as a something that will turn David into Goliath, or the other way around. There is a one of the beauty of football as a sport is that it's a low scoring game. So a relatively low number of scoring opportunities, scoring situations decide the outcome of the game. What I mean in practice is that the results are 1-0, 1-1, etc. Whereas in basketball it's 98 to 96, or in tennis you have lots of sets. In the sets you have games, and only in games you have several balls each, which means that you need to score many points to decide the outcome of the game. And obviously, the more points you score, the less random the result is. So the more points decide of the outcome, the more likely it's that the better player wins. In football, it's not that like that. You can be sitting in the penalty box of your opposing team all the time, and you will lose 1-0 because there will be one counter attack that will just destroy all that you have been doing. And that means that data and statistics are also are can first of all, it can explain certain things, why we haven't been so successful, or etc., etc. But it's also not always explaining the entirety of the score, because the score is so random. And then, by the way, arguably it's one of the reasons that football is so popular, because it is a low scoring game, and certain things can happen against what we see. The score can be against what we have seen on the pitch.
Yeah, and let me ask you, what are you trying to achieve with all this? I mean, other than, I mean, working with your favorite football club and helping them win, I mean, or something. I mean, what is it you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to get every club on the planet to use this? I mean, what's the kind of end game here?
Yeah, our sweet spot lies within the federation, intercontinental governing bodies, and the leagues. So the contracts that we are signing and we're successful with are with competition organizers. One can say it is because by one contract essentially covers the entirety of the competition. Now dozens, hundreds of games, and then everybody has the same tools. And I call it a democratization angle. Access to data has so far been the tool of Goliaths. Yeah, so if you
Okay.
go to a proverbial Manchester City coaching staff, you have access to everything that is possible. Whereas if you go to a lower league club, you're alone. You have to juggle 3 or 4 jobs, and you don't have time to do stuff. And our technology, in particular, is helpful in equipping Davids to fight with Goliaths on equal terms, because what we do is hardware free. So we obtain all this data just from a single camera, even TV broadcast or an equivalent like a tactical camera, which anyone can set up on even an amateur level game. And then the AI does the magic. The AI obtains the data as the same way it obtains the data on any English Premier League club stadium, where it's set up in a very professional way. So thanks to the technology, we are now in a world where access to the data, or access to the high quality granular data, is not limited.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
some
And
teams will have numerous persons responsible for assessing this data, but still, there's a huge, watershed moment in sports that happened just not so long ago.
yeah, I mean, it's part of this thing about the costs of technology falling, which means that more and more people can use it, which kind of evens the odds a bit. Let me ask you, where did the idea come from? I mean, I think it's a cracking idea, and I've got quite a lot of mates who are into football who I'm sure would agree. Where did you get the idea from? I mean, we've all seen things like Moneyball, and the kind of the birth of using data to enhance sport performance. I mean, but this is some way further down the track from that. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so I was working in computer vision, which is the subset of AI that is responsible for what we
Right.
do, image recognition, video recognition, for a while. And I was looking for a way to, to apply my knowledge and my experience onto something practical, something that can make a dent in reality. I have always been a sports fan, a sports nerd, with a particularly fond of football. So that was kind of like this, realization that, well, let's look at the football as a sport and look how prone to disruption, thanks to this recent computer vision technologies. That was my thinking a few years ago upon founding Respo-Vision. How prone to disruption the sport is, because so much can be harvested just from a single video source, and so much information can be then, proposed to participants, to clubs, to players. So that was this realization. It required subject matter expertise, and it requires particular fondness of football and sports in general. But that's how it was in my case.
So when you had the idea and you decided to build a business in this arena, I mean, what sort of problems, what sort of obstacles did you think you would need to overcome to get to where
Mhm.
you are now?
We have always wanted to build the entire idea was to attack something that is barely doable, or or
Mm.
maybe even impossible, but at the verge of being doable, in order to gain advantage, in order to do something new, and not just to be copycats of some other technology from some other region or whatever. So that the biggest obstacle was actually making sure it works. So we did some tests initially, which indicated that it most likely will work, but it was many months of hard research tasks and job to to start to actually turn the idea, the vision, into reality, into an actual working pipeline that can process games and deliver coherent, stable results. So that was the biggest obstacle to overcome initially, like making it work, making the hypothesis, R&D hypothesis, work in a in a damp Tuesday on on proverbial Wigan or
Yeah.
Burnley Stadium. Yeah. So be where the situation, the conditions might not be the best, whether whether the difficulty might be higher, because it's in AI, and I'll wrap up with that comment. In AI, generally, one has to be aware that it is very easy to make things look nice in the demo. You know what I mean? Like, you put up a short video, you claim that a certain thing is looks like this, but selectively, cutting the video, or selectively taking particular doable elements can be misleading, because the reality is that the system has to work 99% uptime, 99% accuracy, etc., etc., which is much more harder to get.
I mean, I was about to ask about that because I mean, football. I mean, what you don't want is this technology not stopping working in the middle of a game or something, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
how did you, but if you like, build resilience into your business model so that those sorts of things don't happen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a official statement and a practical statement. So the official statement is, you design the system to be resilient. You think about certain situations which might happen, which might be difficult. So, for instance, in the training data set for your system, you should include situations like conditions where there's a snow, when the lines are barely visible, when the ball is orange and not white. So you kind of like build data sets to cover for majority of the use cases you perceive will be happening. But the practical reality is that you will always forget something, or some edge case will pop up for particular customer. It would be very important, and then you just need to have an open mind, and be able to integrate this use case, you know additionally train the algorithm to be covering that. So it's a daunting, but like doable work, where you just need to keep your hands on top of things, and be able to to learn and to accept that improvements are to be made as we go.
Yeah, I mean that improvement is a bit of a never-ending journey, isn't it? Really, there's always things you
It
can do.
is. It is. It is. It
Let
is.
me ask you about your values as the CEO. I mean, first of all, what would you say your most important values are as the CEO? And also, how have those values influenced the development of the business?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, well, so I try to work towards and orientate myself and the company with a few important values in mind: professionalism, urgency, high agency, and little bit of a greater good, having a greater good in mind. This is this democratization angle that I mentioned. Like, we first of all, we need to be a professional company that constantly delivers high quality data, which is the sine qua non for us in order to be successful at business. We need to have this sense of urgency, which is, like, the market is moving. If you're not moving, you're losing ground. So you need to constantly develop and improve your processes and technology. And high agency is basically, you need to take things into your own hands. If not
Yeah,
via this route, try two or three other routes, because the big markets are not won by standing idle, but by being, very proactive. And then this democratization angle, which is something that is very helpful, especially when dealing with large organizations, because who doesn't want to contribute towards more equal sports? And then we do, and we are actually actively promoting this idea by decreasing the entrance, the threshold to enter into a professional sports analytics.
yeah. And to what extent do those values come from you, or have they come from the team that you're working with, or do they come from the clients? I mean, the clients saying, "I want this done in this way." I mean, tell us about the process through which. I mean, I can see the logic of the things you've just talked about. How did they emerge?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, as in any complex reality, it's a little bit of both or each sources. So, for instance, I try to work, from the purpose of professionalism and from the purpose of high agency. I want to believe that that's the person who that's who I am. At the same time, the other thing that I mentioned, urgency, is brought to us by the way the sports works. You have times where you can when you can prepare, let's say a weekdays, and you have times when everything's getting decided in a very fast and unforgiving way, which are the weekend games and the games themselves. So this urgency is something that is to a certain extent an externality driven by the way the sport works and
Yeah,
driven by the stakes, which are high for any game, but specifically for some of the games even more so. And the team, you always try to recruit the team that is in line with majority of your values, so it becomes a self propelling engine and self reinforcing system.
yeah. And do you like that part of being the CEO?
By that part, you mean?
By in terms of building the business around a set of values like that. I mean, do you enjoy that? Does that make sense to you? Or I mean, what are your feelings about that?
Again, I would say there are two answers to that: a high level and a pragmatic one. A high level one is I enjoy being at peace with myself, and I enjoy being in integrity, which is being of one substance and not having to wear many different faces or masks. And the pragmatic answer is that it's conducive to business. Can the more you can maintain the course, and the course is in line with what you want or what you have been communicating, the better for the business and for the system, which is predictable thanks to that, and for the results which should come. If you apply certain force in a certain manner and it's logical and it makes sense, if you keep doing that and maintain the course, you will be successful.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about that maintaining the course. I mean, the CEOs I talk to say, building a business is like riding a roller coaster. There are really good days and there are really bad days, and there's everything in between. I mean, what is it about this that motivates you to kind of jump out of bed every morning and kind of keep riding that roller coaster?
Yeah, so there is this small kid in me, which which just enjoys the fact that we are we are working with the world's best, at the pinnacle of sports. Our customers are Champions League winners, World Cup winners, etc., etc., and we can contribute our small part to their success. There are sometimes stories like the proverbial David versus Goliath stories. One of our customers, a Polish club, Wisła Kraków, has won a Polish FA Cup as a second division team, which happens, once every 40 years or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
for a second division team to win, actually. And they qualified to Europe, to European competition thanks to that. And that was like an extremely proud moment, like being aware that that we had our unmeasurable, like hard to measure contribution, because like
yeah,
I don't know if it was 2%, 5%, 10, 20, or 50, but definitely played a little part in it. So this is this small kid in me part. And then there's also the motivation coming from just just striving to be better. There are challenges thrown at you. The technology, current world of technology, is extremely unpredictable. One can expect a major change in the algorithms, in the available technology to come, day by day. There are releases that change the way certain systems and certain companies even can operate. So it's this feeling of being, being in the main current of a very strong and a very unpredictable
yeah, yeah.
river or
And
so, which also motivates me.
yeah, and I mean, seeing as you've mentioned uncertainty, I mean, there's an awful lot of uncertainty about the moment. I mean, there's kind of geopolitics, what the Americans are doing, they're changing the way that things work. I mean, there's obviously there's the war in Ukraine. There's also, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on that makes life difficult for business and that creates uncertainty. Um, I mean, what's your view about dealing with that uncertainty as the CEO? I mean, how do you respond to that? Because you must face it in the sports world. I mean, there's got to be a lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah. So, well, there's this pragmatic way of thinking about it, and I would quote, I think it was Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, who said, "Chaos is a ladder," which means that every situation you can look at from many different vantage points on every single situation. Once one can say, "Well, I cannot do anything because it's chaotic," and the other will say, "Well, it's chaotic, therefore I can rise quicker than I would." Be able to in
Okay.
the other
Yeah.
situation. So there's like a glass half full kind of philosophy, which you're the only one to essentially ask yourself and answer yourself whether you're glass half full or glass half
Yeah.
empty kind of person. So that there's this, and also this uncertainty. You know, there are levels of uncertainty in everything we do. If I, when I asked my wife to become my wife, and she was my, and she was my girlfriend then, so we were about to become, she was about to become my fiance. I wasn't sure about her answer, but I had to do it anyway because I wanted to. So so using this as an example, levels of uncertainty will be with us. So the most logical thing to do is to learn to deal with it, because that will make that will differentiate very successful companies from those just good at the business, especially in such fast paced environment like the technological environment. So I say I take a very optimistic approach towards that, like just learn to swim in the waters of uncertainty, because that's rewarding, and even if you don't think it's rewarding, it's just a necessity. So yeah, that's my point.
I mean, there's some famous saying that I think it might be a Chinese saying or something, what cannot be avoided must be welcomed. I mean, you can't avoid uncertainty. So it's
Yeah.
really, it's not going to go away, is it? And of
it's
course,
a, it's a
go on, sorry.
Yeah, it's a stoic way of approaching things. I would say, yeah, like if you can fight it, then just embrace it, because or don't be bothered with something that things that you cannot exert influence on. They are just there. Yeah. So what you can do is just to focus on what you have influence on. And in the business world, you actually have an influence on lots of many things in
Yeah.
this water. So in this waters full of uncertainty, because you have the steer, and that makes you able to influence reality.
Yeah. And you just mentioned AI. I mean, again, AI is creating a lot of uncertainty. I mean, what's your take on the way AI is going to reshape your world? I mean, your world is all about data, isn't it? and
Yeah.
manipulating that data to provide answers or ideas. I mean, what's your take on the way that's going to kind of shake down over the next few years? Because there's a lot of change happening, it seems to me.
Yeah. So I submit to the words of Benedict Evans, a futurist, or one can say, a technology strategist, who says that something along the lines. I will paraphrase that. That AI is everything that hasn't been implemented yet as a product feature. You know what I mean? Like, we
Mm.
have, things that were claimed to be an AI 5 or 8 years ago are just the basic features of your iPhone or basic features of your notebook right now. Because if they become productionized, if they become features, then everybody lives with them, and they become a normal part of what we deal with, what systems we use. So by by thinking about it, by thinking about this framing, it's, AI are the umbrella of AI is essentially things that have been discovered to be useful or are in the process of, of trying to be, process of molding them to become useful in a, in a product, in business, in etc., and therefore they constitute this, bare this little known future, but future with a potential. And by accepting that, we're looking towards them, and we should just be asking questions. Okay, how does it influence my job? How does it influence my line of business? And in my case, it, those are much easier questions, because I look at the LLMs and I see, okay, well, how applicable it is to my line of business. And interestingly enough, not that much, because, like, I'm doing very um, descriptive as in precise measurements, and not generative. So, like, the essence of LLMs, which is, generate plausible outcomes, will not fly if I am to measure, players' position within a centimeter accuracy. So I'm not afraid of LLMs at all. And maybe I'm thinking, how can they influence the interface of my product? Because, interface can be influenced by the usage of LLM, etc., etc. So by looking at things from that perspective, you kind of like conquer the fear, innate fear that one might have versus the technology.
Yeah, and I mean, the other interesting thing about AI, of course, is that it's going to be everywhere, as far as I can see. So one of the things that interests me about these small digital businesses that are able to work globally is that the culture in the culture around doing business is very different in different parts of the world. I mean, doing business with Manchester United probably very different from doing business in Rio de Janeiro. I mean, what's your take on the kind of localizing? The kind of, I know the technology, but how do you localize the company, the way you work with clients, different football clubs in different parts of the world to accommodate their kind of, if you like, cultural expectations? I mean, what's
Yeah.
your take on that?
So when it comes to the core product that we are delivering, which is data, which are coordinates, which are numerical values, I am in a very fortunate position because I do believe that this product requires little, localization, little effort to be understandable. At the end of the day, we all know the numbers. We all know what is fast and what is not fast, and or what is, good or wrong in certain context, like a football game. So it is very. I have it easy. My mode of operating across the globe is fairly easy because the product is so uniform and so uniformly understood and so uniformly, compared to the benchmarks metrics, that I don't have to deal with it. And of course, apart from that, there is a, let's say, an implementation aspect. So how do I make sure I will convince people to use it, or how do I make sure I will reach out to the decision makers, etc. And this, of course, is very much local. And, in my company, we do that by hiring and by making sure we have representatives on every major market that can, help translate certain cultural quirks and specifics towards to the way that we sell and operate.
So you're suggesting you hire local people to help you
Yeah,
in
yeah.
those markets? Yeah, I
But
see.
local sales and operation people. I'm not hiring local product or technologists. Yeah, product and technology is centralized in my company.
Yeah, okay. And let me ask you another question about being the CEO. So one of the things that interests me about the CEO's role is that there's all these books about 10 steps to build a billion-dollar company. I mean, that was just published a little while ago. But it seems to me that stuff is fine to read, but the truth of the matter is the CEO has to figure out how to build their business in their market with the resources and the people that they've got. So the job of the CEO is to kind of figure out the best way to build your specific business. I mean, every business is different in that sense. How do you work that out? I mean, there's all sorts of things you could do. There's 101 things that you could be distracted by. How do you work out what to prioritize?
Mhm. So whenever I give advice or somebody asks me, what would you do in my situation, etc., I always start with a disclaimer. Like what I will be telling you is based on my particular circumstances, encounter at particular moment in time by myself, who is a very specific and peculiar person with regards to my business, which is also specific, peculiar. What I'm trying to say by this is that there's of course limited applicability or limited translate. No, well, one cannot be naive to think that anything like a listonic kind of book with 10 best or 5 best or whatever examples will be applicable. Instead, people should think that the best approach towards learning or trying to find patterns in the things that are dear to me or important to me is to read a lot or like encounter a lot of examples, try to translate or think about them, how relevant they are, and filter out those which are absolutely irrelevant because of the cultural differences, because of the differences in size, like so many differences, and then and only then treat it as a training data set for whatever decision you need to make, and not a rule book or a like a algorithmical way of doing, like if A then B then C because that's the average from this 20 use cases that I have read. No, it's just let's think about the patterns, think about we should think about the logical dependencies and so on and so forth, and only then apply our best judgment to our own situation, which will be peculiar and which will of course have numerous other specific aspects that have not been caught within these use cases. So I think that as useful as they are, especially to start to start the learning process, this type of books and articles are one should not be misled by the promise they make, sometimes officially, sometimes sometimes implicitly, that they will help you solve your problem. You are the only one who can solve your problems, and you can be helped by tools like that, but only that.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is the CEO's got to take responsibility for that, haven't they?
Yeah, and the buck stops with the CEO.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a very well made point. Talking about that, I mean, when you look back on your journey, I mean, what's been the hardest moment that you've had to deal with, and how has it influenced you? How did that influence you?
So in a startup world, the life cycle or the line of CO journey is a sinusoid of sorts. So a line that goes from up and down, up and down. The ideal setup is that the trend line is upwards, so it always goes a little bit more
Yeah,
up than it goes down. But the real trick, the real skill is to manage the lows. Yeah, the lows will come. There will be times in which you will be thinking, okay, well, this time this is it. It's the end, or the risk is so high that we won't make it, or maybe you will be second guessing your decisions, etc. And this ability to work in uncertainty, which I perceive to be one of the most important traits of a CEO, comes in handy in such situations. You look at this, low, and you say to yourself, well, this is probably perceived as low because I don't know everything. Maybe tomorrow I'll have a piece of information that will make this tragic situation into an opportunity. And also, I've been in this situation many times before and somehow I survived. Therefore, it is likely that I will survive. Kind of like learn to deal with this uncertainty, learn to deal with these tough moments, because they are what they are, tough moments to overcome.
yeah, and they happen, don't they? I mean, you can try not to have them happen.
Inevitably.
They get
Yeah.
you in the end, don't they? Yeah. Let me ask you, how have any of those moments, I mean, how have they shaped you as a CEO? Have you had any kind of critical moments that have shaped you?
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Like we had a certain challenges when it comes to our finding our product market fit. We had a certain challenges when we had to we had to fundraise and design a strategy that will successfully bring us through the end line. And we I think what the most important outcome of this situation was this ability to pivot or this ability to correct your course. So I was telling earlier, answering your question, that it's important to maintain the course, but it's even more important to know whether maintaining the course will leave you, will break your ship and leave
Well,
you.
I mean, what you've just raised there is a really interesting point because, a lot of the language is, you must be determined and you never give up. But the reality is that you reach moments when you think, do I go left or do I go right? And ultimately, it's the CEO, perhaps with the chair of the board or whatever. But I mean, that role is critical in making the right
Yeah.
decision.
Yes, and I would even dare say that the situations where you have to turn left or right are the easy situations because you are faced with a clear decision point
Yeah,
in which you need to
binary, isn't
make a decision, and you make a decision and then you own the consequences and you can live with it. But the most difficult situations is that you are on a course and the course is even looking good. There's a sun in the air, the winds are
it?
blowing nicely, etc. But what you actually need to do is to change the course because you see that in a moment the sun will not be up, the winds will not be blowing will be blowing against you, and if you don't change the course when it's not clear that you have to, and it's logical to just continue doing what you're doing, are the most important, most critical, most crucial moments a CEO can face.
Yeah, and they're very difficult to resolve, aren't they? Because there's no guidebook, it seems to me.
There's implicit assumption that you should like in professional football there's this saying that you don't change the winning team. You have just won a game. You don't change the winning team because you have won a game, and what matters. This is the ultimate. This is the ultimate thing to win a game. So, but in the business, it doesn't necessarily is so. And hopefully in professional sports, there are managers who are not who understand that even if you win the previous game, the new game that you play, the new rival that you play against might require different tactic, different team, different players, and you should be wise to actually tweak and tweak things before
I mean,
you embark on the.
it's a
Yeah.
very interesting point you're making there because what you're saying is you don't play the game, you play the opponent. So
Oh
you,
yeah.
depending on what you think the opponent's strengths and weaknesses are, is really what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are very few situations in the business world where you have so good team, so winning team that you just go and do your work. I know I remember Barcelona from the Tiki Taka era. Like I'm simplifying things, but Frank Rijkaard did not have to do so much of a tactical tweaks game to game because they were so dominant. They were so much better, or certain teams in NBA who have been dynasty teams like Lakers during Shaq and Kobe era. Like they have this triangle offense, but they did not need to change it because they were so much better and won 2 3 championship in a row. But those are very rare moments in which we should be realistic. One should never expect that you will create a historical dynasty or historical performance. You should much rather be aware that there will be games that are in which you are a favorite. There will be games in which you will not be a favorite. That means that you need to be very tactically aware and flexible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of the other interesting things about being the CEO, I think, is this thing about tackling the status quo. I mean, all new businesses, if you like, are going up against the competition, which is the status quo, the stuff that's already out there. I mean, how did you feel about bringing your proposition to market? Because it's quite a different proposition, it seems to me. I mean, so you are going to clubs and saying, we want to well, we can work with you to do something very different. I mean, how do you feel about challenging the status quo? Does it bother you?
Yeah, I was. We were foolish enough to not care about it. That would be my answer. Which we were because the history of my company is that the company was not founded by sports professionals. Quite the opposite. It was founded by technology professionals. So people who understood the technology and believed that it can be that good. but that's a blessing and a curse. A blessing in a sense that we have not been bound by the preconceptions that the market had, like this will not work, who needs this accurate data, whatever. But the curse is that we have had less acute understanding of what decision points or criteria are being applied towards deciding what data I will be using as a decision maker or a team or a federation. So I would say, yeah, there was a certain level of blissful ignorance in us deciding that we will tackle the status quo, even if the status quo didn't want, wasn't welcoming and did not expect any outsiders tackling it. But since we did, and we were persistent in doing that, the cracks in the surface began, and with time, the superior product has been able to crack into the realm of sports.
And what would you say when you look back on your journey was the most important thing that you've learned?
Mhm. Well, I think so. It will be very trivial thing, but grit beats talent 100 times out of 100. And I think it's the most quite recently I stumbled upon a scientific paper. I cannot quote the author or the title, unfortunately, but there was two lines drawn of let's say early bloomers and less talented people who were conscientious workers, essentially. So think, for instance, let's say what would be a good comparison? We all know about top dogs in any sports who were blessed from the age of 16 or 18. Kylian Mbappe in soccer, or Neymar. Or Neymar would be a perfect example, or Ronaldinho would be another perfect example, who were so above everybody else when they were 18, 20, that it was just everybody understood that they will be the best in the world for many years to come. But this creates a adverse motivation. If you're so good, then why should I try? I'm already better. Yeah. So and then you allow the others who are not so good, but who had to try more in order to even compete with the early risers, early and the talented guys. And that creates a tendency, that creates a rigor which will make you more successful eventually, because at a certain point in time you will overcome the talented guy, and then you will just run away from him or her because you have the foundations and the other party has not. So essentially there were like two graphs in this article. One was a early riser quickly to the higher level, and then very slow growth, versus more of a linear growth that at a certain point in time along the age of 25, 26, just surpasses the first one and just runs away. So I think that also that's also a useful lesson in business. Grit beats talent.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think there's a lot of truth there. I mean, particularly because business is quite a tough game anyway. So if you haven't got a bit of determination, a bit of grit, you're not going to make progress anyway. Don't matter how clever you are. Let me ask you about, if you were going to offer a piece of advice to somebody just starting out on a journey like yours, I mean, what would that one piece of advice be?
Mhm. um I would say try to adapt any advice that you are getting into your particular situation, and think about trends and not golden bullets. There's not a single golden bullet. There's no one should be able to tell you you should do it or you should not do it, because they don't possess the information, they are not you, etc. They can only tell you that in my circumstances I did that and it was successful or not, and you have to filter that out. So that pertains to the previous answer that I gave, but I think it's worth reiterating. It's kind of like this responsibility ownership model. I mean, a high agency model. At the end of the day, you are responsible about the reality around you. You are responsible about the way you respond to this reality, and you're responsible about the effects of your decisions. And everything else is just a noise that you can sift through and filter and make use of it. But the proverbial buck stops at you when we're talking about the business decisions or a decision to start or run a particular business.
And you mentioned making mistakes. I mean, the CEOs. I mean, every CEO I speak to, so I've made loads of mistakes. I mean, how do you feel about making mistakes? I mean, they're great opportunities to learn, but they can be tough emotionally. I mean, what are your feelings about that?
in a significant majority of situations, it's making a mistake and being able to, and being aware of that, or being able to do the course correction is much better than not making a mistake because of a, decision paralysis, or just being afraid of making a decision. So even if you make a mistake, you have been moving towards something. You have been acting under certain assumptions, and if you can add to your repertoire an ability to change course, then you will be in much better position after making a mistake and course correcting than you will have been if you have been avoiding a decision because you were unsure of the consequences. So making a mistake is a bread and butter. It's not about making a mistake, but it's about learning and correcting the mistake where the differentiation happens.
And I think, I mean, it's a very well made point. That, I mean, I think that's often the key to businesses being successful, is that the ones that are successful recognize very quickly when they've made a mistake. I mean, they might work hard to avoid making a mistake, fair enough, but they recognize when they've made a mistake and they change course very quickly. I mean, they adapt.
Yeah, and that pertains to the point that you have to have a certain criteria, certain KPIs, certain reference points that will allow you to assess whether the mistake was made. So you look at the numbers, that's the easiest one, or you look at the outcomes, or you have thought about the desired, undesired outcome, and once you hit them, you know which is which, and you are actually aware whether you made a mistake. The biggest problem is that if you haven't done the homework, and you don't know what is the success factor, what is the criteria, acceptance criteria of particular decision or whatever, and then you just keep on doing things that you have selected without knowing whether they were good or not.
Yeah. And one last question before we wind up. I mean, what would you say? What is it that has made you and your business successful? You've obviously been on the journey. We've talked about lots of the things that you have to do to build a business. I mean, what would you say in your context? What are the things specifically that have made you successful?
Yeah, I would say that I still have a long way to become really successful, and to really win the market. But as successful as we are, as my company is right now, I think that if I'm looking, into myself, I would say that extreme ownership and responsibility was the key factor. So I wasn't when something happened or somebody made a mistake, I wasn't focusing on, okay, well, you made this mistake. Why did you do that? Don't do that again. Blah blah blah. I was making, okay, like, how did I allow to happen? How can I not allow that to happen? What was my role in this, and how can I improve myself instead of just trying to externalize the blame?
Yeah, I guess which is coming back to your point about taking responsibility, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Pavel, thank you for coming along. Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it's a really interesting area. I mean, I think it's going to have quite a big impact on sport over the next few years. So I look forward to reading more about all the things that you're doing in due course. So thanks for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
Cheers, Pavel. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.